Welcome to the Good Life Podcast, Episode 1. My name is Kurt Bell. I created this podcast as an alternative to those who just can't quite stomach or take the life alternatives that rely on superstition and faith, and are looking for an alternative that is grounded more in reality. I wrote a book called Going Alone that outlines my journey through the wilderness to discover an emptiness that seems to be out there, an absence. I call that thing the great indifference. And my response to that was not despair or to give up, but to ask myself if, in fact, there is no God, and we're on our own, then what constitutes good? What makes the good life? And what can I do to pursue that in the short time that I have remaining? This podcast is my sharing of my daily endeavor to outline the objectives and principles of the good life and to share with you through essay form what I've learned. I essentially read to you from my daily blog posts. The blog posts have a title, a date, and they're addressed to a friend from my youth named Eric, who took his own life out of a matter of principle when we were still pretty young. So I use Eric now as my target to open up each of these volleys of communication, which I'll now read with you, one after another. The train whistle that you'll hear between each of these installments is the train that sounds out in the ghost town of Siberia in the desert, which is the setting for my discovery of the great indifference, and the home of something that I call the muse. So whenever you hear that train whistle, that's a little interlude between the episodes. So let's begin now. Let's discover a little bit about the good life and the perspective of a life lived in courage, joy, and independence. A Gaze That Is Straight, September 29th, 2019. Dear Eric, your gaze never once appeared to waver. Was this due to your youth, or was that it? Was it the strength and courage of small age and ignorance that powered your relentless, awe-inspiring gaze? Was it something deeper? I suspect not. None of us has any superpowers, to be sure. We're all failing, falling lights in the night sky, brilliant at once and then fast fading back into deep night. Yet you put on a good show early on. Sure, it was an authentic display, and I certainly did the same thing, don't we all? But I know there is a deeper and still straighter gaze to be had. But this one comes not of youth, but of age, and experience, and the effort of becoming, and not just being, strong. To go down with the ship is a saying we use to describe the fortitude of someone who is resolved to carry through with worthy principle even unto death. This trait is a virtue, and one imagined most in those who have lived long enough to acquire something more to live for than life itself. This is something it takes time to genuinely gain, though it is possible to pretend in earnest. Nevertheless, it takes time to gain that deepest of forward-looking sight, that at once seeks what is ahead while also taking in the periphery, that sees both the worthy object before us as well as the horrors at either side, and yet hardly flinches in either outward or inward aspect or resolve. Mature sight then is gained when we both clearly remember the past and maintain the fortitude to stay the path of virtue. We must also enlist reason to help us discern the way, and to help us pick our way forward, or pick our forward course, before setting out slowly across the landscape of life options. This quality of character and resolve cannot be easily had in youth, though its appearance can be taught to and emulated by the young, and may become genuine with practice. Yet trained fortitude does not become something more until we have the wisdom of experience, born of honest reflection and the power of reason, to discern clearly where our energies and endeavors should best be applied. This is when our sight becomes clear, and when the depths behind our eyes grow still and deep, becoming pools of quiet resolve, seeming perhaps bottomless to those who have never held their breath to swim down during youth, to plumb the darkness below to see or feel their way to the seeming bottom, to lift handfuls of cold, grainy sand from below, and to know that there is no such thing as bottomless, or forever, or eternity, just the now that demands our attention and which draws our gaze towards its quite worthwhile and always immediate present, the down which can never clearly be seen, but yet which experience and resolve cause our eyes to make the clearest attempt to perceive. Selecting the right picture frame. September 30th, 2019. Dear Eric, looking back from the vantage point of 3 decades, I can see that we both lived and portrayed lives which were rather stereotypical of young men caught up in the atmosphere and experience of academia. What other lives did we know then? What other way could we have possibly imagined? Our demonstrations of living at that time were certainly genuine, as it's no false charade when there's just a single mask to wear. Still, isn't the fact of the mask something of a charade? Maturity beyond the teenage years brings opportunity to change and become the someone we might set out to be, or to become the someone we've settled for, or perhaps the someone we think others imagine for us. Our demonstration of success in this endeavor of becoming is made evident through our portrayal of life by arrangement of the artifacts we collect within the context and circumstance of our living. We decorate and adorn ourselves and our surroundings with outward messages of who we are, or who we want others to think we are. And we use these same messages to remind ourselves to be and become the person of either our settling or of our dreams. This is the life we live, and the life we portray. But it's easy to become so hung up on the life we portray that this effort of display becomes our living more than the life we might actually live. This occurs when the impression we seek to make becomes more important to us than the life from which the impression should be but an artifact. Like a homeowner obsessed with their yard at the expense of the family within their home, or a student aiming their energies so squarely at the prestigious degree that they fail to make broad use of their time at school, or a senior who curates the safety of their golden years at the expense of their last chance to live. Such endeavors are energies towards the impression of an end, rather than the end itself. And while such works and focus may certainly contribute to the successful achievement of such desired results, their engagement alone should not become the end itself. Go into evil, October 1st, 2019. Dear Eric, good and evil never crossed our minds, and we certainly never attempted to define these concepts of what constitute right and wrong. What a good chat that might have been. I only attempted to address right and wrong later in life. I lived all the way into my 40s without any sound idea about what good or bad thinking and behavior were. I only took on this challenge when I found myself in need of a definition of life meaning, and when I decided this meaning would be the pursuit of virtue, and I didn't know what virtue was. I decided then that virtue was the pursuit of well-being, which in turn is defined as the objective improvement of the welfare and circumstance of any living thing. I know that this is a very broad definition, though my principal aim in virtue is the well-being of my fellow humans, and with an understanding that improvement of well-being of other creatures, as well as the ecosystem as a whole, creates an overall betterment which raises the relative well-being of all life. But what's this to do with right and wrong, or good and evil? And how do these two concept sets differ? What is right is simply whatever makes things better for the many without unreasonable compromise to the well-being of the few. Wrong, then, is the corresponding opposite, and that which makes things worse for the many with unreasonable improvement of the few. Good and evil in turn describe the overt intent of the actor in performing right or wrong behaviors. In this sense, someone who is ignorant of the harm their behavior causes to the many is guilty of doing wrong, while their intent may not be evil. Yet if they understand the harm they cause, yet they choose to do it anyway, then they are guilty of evil. On the other hand, someone who makes the world better by their choices and actions performs right and is also good if they understand the positive impact of what they do. The pursuit of virtue, then, is nothing more than seeking first to understand the potential impact of our decisions regarding well-being, right and wrong, and then resolving to make the choices which knowingly make things better, good over evil. Making the decision for right and good often takes work and is rarely easy, though this is the way to virtue. This is how to live the good life. We go into evil when we first collect the facts we need ahead of an important decision, and then weigh and consider these facts in light of the pros and cons and assumptions about what will happen if we make a choice. The critical path is the way forward that seemingly leads towards virtue and the improvement of well-being for the many. We go into evil if this path takes us away from our preference in pursuit of the good. Going into evil begins with ourselves. This fight starts with a resistance to our own unworthy desire and want. We engage the fight with temperance and simplicity and apathy, and a decision to do right and perform good in spite of the discomfort it may cause to our own desire or even our own well-being. We go into evil when we choose the good life.